DAX Best Practices Part 2 is on the road. What should I talk about today? Today I'm going to discuss DAX aesthetics, clean and tidy DAX, long-running functions to be careful with in terms of performance, debugging with DAX Studio, getting to know DAX Studio, and performance monitoring. Alright, let's get started. As developers, we always need to get out of our own bubble and realize that we're not the only ones looking at this code. If it's during the time that we're moving the project forward, or if it's while we're working, we need to think about how our code is concise enough and clear enough for someone who is not familiar with the project to look at it and understand it immediately, if we're discussing our code base. From DAX's perspective overall in his appearance, if until now we needed an external tool or site like DAX Formatter to design and arrange it nicely for us, now we have within the interface itself the DAX query view that allows us to do it. If I examine, let's say, a measure I made, a measure written unclearly to organize it, until now we had to copy the code and transfer it to another tool for organization. No, at present we have the convenience of being able to directly navigate to DAX query view, insert the code actually inside this model, within this component, and then easily click on the Format Query View option to format the query in a hassle-free manner. He sorts out the code for us, cool, and fixes the measure. Our code is already super cool in terms of its visual aspects. Okay, so if I dive into the code, I see that there's a reference to a specific value range for the product. As someone who wrote this code, I know that it's actually about the same product called long sleeve. A new guy is coming, he'll look at this code and won't understand what I want. What do these values even mean? In order to understand this, he needs to access that damn product table and try to find that value from here to there and try to grasp the connotation. Instead, I could have actually given him a hint within the code itself. So I would say to you, yes, so you can write a comment. And then whoever looks at it will understand that it's a long slip. But you can do it in a much smarter way and use variables. For those who don't know, you can insert variables into the DAX code using the syntax. I will be right back in a second. Then I'll use var term, which is like, if you know it, like SQL declare. I will assign a name to my variable and then specify the expression that it will contain. Now, if I want to sort this out once and for all, I will attempt to locate variables of that nature, various types of expressions that repeat themselves in order to prevent their execution every time the measurement is invoked. When this index runs, once he will approach the chosen value, and then again he will approach the chosen value. Instead of doing it once and then using this value in the check multiple times, so I can spare him that and he can only approach things at the time of declaration. Thus, I can confidently state that it would be more efficient to utilize the selected product instead of running the selected value every time in order to enhance performance and minimize unnecessary redundancy. After we write the variable, it is supposed to understand the word return, otherwise it will not know what we want. As a result, we have this variable and we've saved on characters, resulting in a code that is shorter and clearer, making it more concise and easier to understand. But I still want to get rid of the comment, so what do? Instead of using a saw, I'll add another measurement more, a variable that will be called isLongSleeve in the program. And in his explanation, I'll give him all these conditions. Now, as soon as I put the variable here instead of the conditional statement, I don't have to use a comment at all. And then my code is similar to this. If it is a blog slev, execute the tawasam this action in the specified manner. If it is something else, do this trick, and now everything here is much colder and clearer to the eye. Okay, let's move on to the next topic. Long-running functions that require a lot of performance, basically functions that are a bit more heavy-duty. So let's start from the beginning. I won't touch on all the points here, but I will talk about some of them. Let's start with empty arrays. Developers tend to convert empty values to some other value, whether it's 0 or any other value. The engine beast always utilizes maximum power, so if it's unnecessary, it's best to avoid it, as it undoubtedly impacts performance. If error is error, it's functions that someone who works with Excel knows well. These are functions that we use when our expression can return an error. Now, Power BI has a lot of functions that can deal with this. So if I take some measure that I created here, which checks if there is the capital letter A in the first name field, and if not, it returns 0. Here I also put it as an example. We can see that it works fine. If I remove this function without doing anything, without changing anything, you will see that it really returns an error. Not always there is the letter A. Okay, we have an error, but to handle it I don't need to include that same function. I can observe that in the find function itself, there is some mention of what occurs with the n value. I'm able to insert the 0 that I previously inserted there in case of an error. And regardless of the outcome, at this moment my function will operate and yield the identical arrays. So, it's about how awesome it is. David, compared to the operator of the license, in case we're worried that our division camp will divide by 0 and we don't want it to return an error, it's better to use David instead of if. It's also cooler. We also save like this in the code, and if we're 100% sure that we can't have a 0 camp, it's better not to use Dwight, because Dwight will do the check anyway. So in cases like these, it's better to use an operator. Summarize versus summarize columns, it's about creating summaries. Summarize is a relatively more basic function compared to summarize columns, so it is recommended to use summarize columns, but of course you should do tests, check one function against another, and see what actually works faster for you, because it's not always a rule that works the same way. So do tests, and see how each function affects performance. And what brings me to our upcoming subject, which is performance testing carried out using DAX Studio. Now I'll see how we're investigating performance in Power BI using DAX Studio. To research the performance, let's say I have these amazing controls as an example. I need to take the query that runs it, and for that I'll use the performance analyzer. Okay, I have the query. Now I need to go to DAX Studio. It's a separate software, it needs to be installed separately, and then it will appear under Tools. In DAX Studio, I paste the query, and when I run it, the result is the same as what was returned in the console, and I can also check the runtime there. The interesting part is the server timing. As soon as I clicked on it, you'll see this flashy light, and the moment I press run, we also have all sorts of interesting engine data. We have the impact on the CPU, and I can also see that actually in order to get the result perfectly, they wanted 4 tablespoons of salt. And now the queries I can see in SQL language that we know, to understand what is occurring there in order to comprehend that same point that has an influence on my performance. Now first and foremost, I positioned myself within the calculated column table, and I additionally utilized in a measure that uses a filter. So I want to change it now and swap the metric that will be used in the KPI filter like they recommend in base practices, and get rid of the calculated column and see how it affects the performance. Alright, so in case I visit this place, I can observe that I possess this measurement at this location, which employs a filter. Not recommended in terms of DAX practices. Instead, I have a pre-prepared measure that does the same thing but uses a KIP filter. So I'll swap this measure with this measure. And here I also have some size plus color, along with a calculated column that I created in order to enhance the functionality. To demonstrate effect on performance, if I opt out and now display, I'll redo the run. Alright, so I desired this in DAX Studio, and pay attention. At present I merely possess 2 signs, and my time has been greatly reduced. Okay, DAX PassFax is over. Tell me if you liked it, as there are many points I haven't covered. If there's something you want me to explain more, let me know. I'm waiting to hear your thoughts.